When you were a little kid, did you ever wonder why Voltron just didn't form the damned robot and stomp all over the bad guys the minute they got there? That's the problem that Werewolf the Apocalypse presented to players, who didn't hesitate in the slightest to assume giant killing machine form the minute mutant bad guys showed up, or vampires, or police, or crossing guards, or people in grocery express lanes with 16 items. When you always have Crinos as an option, everything starts to look like an oversized chew toy. In this Mad Musings, we're looking at the second RPG in White Wolf's World of Darkness series, Werewolf the Apocalypse. I'm Mr. Welch, and it's time for Doggy Style. Werewolf was published in 1991, closely on the heels of Vampire the Masquerade. In the World of Darkness, werewolves are born, not created, so forget everything that Lon Chaney Jr. taught you, except acting. Take notes on that. The first edition was created by Mark Hagen, though like the first edition of Vampire, Werewolf quickly was revised into the second edition, and this one was the one that players latched onto initially. The character generation system was standard White Wolf, with a few modifications for Werewolf specifically, of course. If you want to know more about the character generation system, go check out my previous videos on other White Wolf games, such as Vampire, Aeon, and of course their greatest masterpiece, Street Fighter. Werewolf is one of the most combat-oriented games possibly ever produced. Vampire loved its combat, but several of the clans had to work at being human-sized slap chops. Not Werewolf. From the start, everybody has the ability to go full-on the Howling and turn into 8-foot-tall murder machines. Throw in more than a few werewolf abilities called gifts, and you've got Furrydom's version of the WWE. Unfortunately, because the game is so dominated by combat, and the players tend to be overpowered from the start, this can be hard to run as a storyteller, as it results in Combat of the Week with new tougher monsters from the various source books. Werewolf creation follows the same priority system as all White Wolf games, with the new choices of breed, tribe, and auspice. Everything else, including willpower and backgrounds, remain the same. You're now playing as a Guru, a rabid eco-warrior protecting the spirit Gaia from the ravages of the worm and the evil forces of capitalism. Werewolf has 2 magical fuels for its superpower instead of Vampire's only 1, with Gnosis and Rage. Vampire's humanity and virtues are replaced with the Renown system, which keeps track of glory, honor, and wisdom, which are required to gain rank in the eyes of the tribe, which open up new and bloodier ways to eviscerate crossing guards when you're late to work. Breed is the first choice. That tells you who your non-werewolf parent is. If it's human, you're a Hominid. If it's wolf, you're a Lupus. If it's 2 werewolves, you're a deformed sterile freak called a Metis. Each of these have mechanical benefits, and a few tribes are restricted by breed. The fact that you can have half-siblings that are part wolf is a bit disturbing to think about, and has been a constant source of squick for gamers for over 3 decades now. Just remember the old adage, one man's werewolf erotica is everyone else's furry porn. Auspice is your moon sign, specifically what phase of the moon you're born under. Each one determines your character's role in werewolf society. A full moon makes you an Arun, or a warrior. Lots of combat abilities, and possibly the most popular auspice. A gibbous moon makes you a Galliard, or a bard and teacher. Philodox are born under the half moon, and therefore they're the judges. Theurges get the crescent moon and become seers and sages. Finally, Ragabash are born under a new moon, and are the jokesters, tricksters, and bane of storytellers everywhere. Every auspice gets discounts on certain gifts, as well as a few starting modifications to your derived stats. Finally, you've got the 13 tribes. There used to be more tribes, but werewolves being werewolves had a bad habit of killing each other off or getting killed by great evil spirits. These tribes are the primary influence on the character, as tribal members tend to act the same and be of a single mindset. Then again, you're playing a pack animal, so individuality isn't considered a preferable trait. This did lead to a lot of stereotyping of not just characters, but players as well. There's a reason why storytellers didn't bother creating complex social interactions when they had more than one player, with a Lupus, Arun, Geta, Fenris in the party. Going in alphabetical order, you start with the Black Furies, an all-female clan of militant man-haters who are dedicated to saving Gaia and smashing the patriarchy, anyone who supports the patriarchy, anyone suspected of supporting the patriarchy, or just anyone they can smell a Y chromosome on. They don't get along with several of the other tribes, obviously, and they tend to be one of the more problematic tribes when running a game because of their built-in bias. Bone Gnawers are the street-level Guru, and are often portrayed as homeless people. Their writing was some of the most inconsistent, as they were portrayed as either all hobos living in squalor, or at other times anybody who was working middle class or below, as they didn't believe anybody was superior to another. Children of Gaia were a running joke in a lot of werewolf games, as they tried to be the peaceful 8-foot-tall killing machines. They wanted everybody to work together and get along, despite many of the tribes downright hating each other. They were going to have peace among the tribes, no matter how many people they had to brutally murder to achieve it. Fianna are Irish werewolves, tied heavily to the legends of the Fae and some of the most nationalistic stereotypes imaginable. We are talking the most green beer drinking, IRA supporting, potato munching, spalpeen gets this side of the Atlantic. Take Liam Neeson on a bad hair day. Add stilts, fangs, claws, and you've got a Fianna. Quite a few people considered this stereotype offensive, but most of my players with Irish blood used it as an excuse to rampage down Downing Street. Aaron go braw, y'all. The Get of Fenris, the absolute bane of many a storyteller. If anybody was going to thank the Fuhrer for suddenly regaining the use of their legs, it was going to be the Get. These guys were supposed to be the angry Viking werewolves, but had a bad habit of devolving into fascist stereotypes where everybody who wasn't a Get of Fenris was beneath them, quite literally. In-game, they just wanted to kill things, with a huge selection of combat gifts. Again, the game's inherent tribalism proved to be problematic as the Get did not get along with numerous other clans, bordering often on absolute hatred. This led to a lot of players getting tossed from games for not playing nice. Glasswalkers are the unholy love child of Gordon Gekko and Wolfman Jack. Werewolves that love living inside the cities. They're looked down on by the more traditional and militant clans. Glasswalkers are too busy counting their money to notice. They believe that the best way to fight the worm is to take the fight to where it dwells, which isn't the wilderness. That's the stated goal of Glasswalkers, though many players just use it as an excuse to play an even more violent Patrick Bateman. Red Talons are the all-wolf tribe. No humans allowed, and metas are often torn apart at birth. They are dedicated to culling humans, or anything vaguely bipedal, or anyone suspected of being a biped, or just anything in the primate family. As you can expect, they're another difficult tribe to work with in a group because of their built-in hatreds. This was later retconned in other editions, but the stereotype remains. Shadow Lords have the reputation of being the perpetual second in command of werewolves. They are always behind the Silver Fangs in power, something they absolutely hate. Because of this, they're generally considered backstabbing opportunists who will gladly sacrifice their allies if it gets them a little higher in rank. Even in a party that doesn't include a Silver Fang, the Shadow Lords will always try to become the pack leader. It's actually part of their background. Silent Striders are werewolves of an Egyptian bent, working as messengers and occasionally necromancers when needed. They have a bad habit of always sounding like Omar Sharif, even if they aren't trying to. I don't know why Strider players always turn into Omar Sharif. It's not a bad thing, I just wish those players would realize the man was in more than just Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. Silver Fangs are the Habsburgs of lycanthropes. They're the ruling tribe of the Children of the Moon, but they're also incredibly inbred and possess numerous mental deficiencies. However, they have connections with several power players in mortal society and tend to be old money. They are more eccentric than insane, which is a saving grace for them compared to the vampiric Malkavians. Stargazers are werewolves normally tied to Tibet. They're more concerned with the spirit world than the physical world. They're known for being wise and observant, and they're also tired of the constant infighting between all the tribes, and in canon lore finally pack their bags and leave the other tribes to their ultimate fate. Which, of course, makes some wonderful retconning when somebody is told in an ongoing campaign that his tribe just told everyone else, "Screw you guys, I'm going home." Uktina are the Inuit werewolves, one of the 3 Native American tribes originally, though the Croatian are now extinct. They're also heavily spiritual and consult the spirits for secrets and ways to combat the worm. They are very worried about the Wendigo, who didn't take all the newcomers well. Unfortunately, the Uktina are too tied up in their scrying and divining to act as peacekeepers. Lastly, the Wendigo are the militant Native American werewolves who really don't like all these new guys showing up. They're one of the more difficult tribes to work into a game because the players will consider every tribe from another continent the enemy and use that as an excuse to go aggro on other players. They are great in hand-to-hand, but they have more of a spirit vibe than the Get of Fenris. That's the 13 tribes. As you can see, there's not much encouraging many of the tribes to work together. Everybody's supposed to cooperate to bring down the evil forces of the worm spirit, but many of the tribes have their own biases so hardwired that the players use the prejudices just as an excuse to beat on each other. Black Furies hate men. Red Talons hate human. Get of Fenris hate anyone they view as weak. Wendigo hates tribes from other continents. Almost all of them hate the Bone Gnawers, and the Stargazers are about to wash their hands of the entire lot of them. The core attraction, and one of the biggest problems of the game, is that werewolves are really good at fighting and killing. They've got 5 forms, and 3 of them are just nastier forms of the human or wolf form. Glabro is the near-human form and makes them bigger and tougher. Hispo, or near-wolf, is pretty much a dire wolf. And then there is the infamous Crinos, or Wolfman. This is when they go full-on werewolf, giving them increased stats, regeneration, and claws and fangs. Crinos also lets them do aggravated damage and causes an instinctive fear in humans called the delirium. Werewolves use rage to fuel their combat abilities, though too much rage causes them to fury and go absolutely insane. And Gnosis will fuel their spiritual abilities, and they do have to balance both to maximum effect. Few things can permanently hurt them among mortals. Their only true threat is supernatural creatures, and even then they outclass most of them in melee. However, their list of foes is long, and for many the threat is more psychological than physical. The main enemy of the Garou is an insane spirit called the Worm. This was originally the spirit of rebirth tied with the Weaver and the Wild to form the balance of life. However, the Weaver has gone insane. It has trapped the Worm so it could not renew, and now it can only destroy, and that is what is leading to the upcoming apocalypse. The Worm creates evil spirits called Banes, who are the primary spiritual threat to the Garou. Banes can possess humans, turning them into the twisted mutant Fomori, who are another common enemy in the game. The Black Spiral Dancers are corrupted werewolves who willingly serve the Worm, and are probably the most dangerous of the most common enemies. All these creatures are something out of a Lovecraftian Captain Planet cartoon, as they believe the best way to destroy the world is by pollution and tainted products. The most famous villain of Werewolf has to be the corporation Pentex, whose primary product range is pure evil. Pretty sure that's in their orientation guide on page 2. Pentex is a holding company for a large number of other companies that are also devoted to making the worst possible products possible. Their whiskey contains evil spirits. Their toys promote anorexia. Their oil company makes British Petroleum look like Greenpeace. White Wolf got a little anvilicious in many of the Pentex schemes because of how cartoonishly they were presented. One problem with World of Darkness crossovers is that when you start adding in the mage's technocracy, Pentex's antics would not be tolerated by the equally corporate but much more pragmatic syndicate. Werewolves are not alone in their fight, as they have allies in the form of kinfolk. These are humans and wolves related to werewolves that for whatever reason didn't gain the powers of the werewolf. They have a few powers like immunity to delirium and other supernatural minor powers, but they're still quite squishy compared to their Garou cousins. They are treasured by the Garou because they are some of the only allies they have that can function in mortal society, or can act as pure breeding stock. They have their own book that fleshes them out, but their players have to be careful when fighting the monsters that can go toe-to-toe with werewolves. There are a lot of other changing breeds, I think over 20, such as werebears, wererats, werecoyotes, and no small number of werecats. These have given the game the reputation of being a furry combat simulator, and have been the bane of storytellers wanting to run a pure werewolf game, and not the MMA equivalent of the Animal Olympics. Some of the races, specifically the Asian varieties, were known to be overpowered in game and generally banned unless everyone got to play one. White Wolf has always had a problem with game balance, and Werewolf was no exception. The Garou also have the ability to enter the spirit world, also known as the Umbra, by spending some Gnosis and using a ritual. This was actually a great way of getting rid of powerful vampires because they didn't have a way to get back. Don't try this against mages, as the spirit world actually increases their powers. Because of this, there are entire spirit worlds to explore, and this leads to werewolves bargaining with spirits to serve as allies or to teach them new gifts and rituals. Assuming the spirits aren't corrupted and just try to kill the Garou, or worse. Werewolf has the reputation of being a tough game to run. Most players are there to kill people and break things. The massive combat monsters they're playing doesn't help change that. The game itself tries to chastise players for having wrong bad fun, but most players are too busy tearing Fomori limb from limb to pay attention to the fact that they aren't playing the game the designers wanted them to play. Later editions tried to roll back the tribalism that made several of the tribes almost unplayable in mixed company, but the fact that the werewolves couldn't work together was a major plot point on why they're losing their war. This is a game that requires the right players to make it work as designed, but if your players just want to go full Crinos on everything, let them. It's a game, it's meant to be played. You can find Werewolf the Apocalypse books almost anywhere used books are sold. They're not that hard to find or that expensive. White Wolf only made a gazillion of them. However, some of the tribal books are very difficult to find intact because the tribal symbols were cut out from the front cover and they were very easy to tear. There were 4 editions, with a 5th edition promised this year, though later versions retconned out the end of the world when White Wolf destroyed the World of Darkness to restart the game world, with the less regarded Werewolf the Forsaken. Next up, I'm alternating back out of the World of Darkness with a look at Boot Hill from TSR originally, the Wild West RPG from years ago that has had multiple versions of varying success. Its wargames origins are still very apparent, with social skills added on as almost a side note. But the best part about it is I get to use my drawl in this review. But until next time, remember, bow wow wow yippee yo yippee yay, y'all.